Did you know that Max Verstappen secretly raced a Ferrari at the Nürburgring using a fake name? What seemed like a simple private test could be the clearest sign, yet that Max is preparing for something big outside of F1. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, should Verstappen focus solely on F1 or explore new categories? Is Red Bull losing control over its star driver? In this video, we'll break down Max Verstappen's controversial secret test at the world's most feared circuit, the Nürburgring Nordschleif. What did he do there? Why did he use a pseudonym? And how could this affect his future in F1? Max Verstappen, one of the most dominant drivers in recent Formula One history, has taken his obsession with perfection and adrenaline to a completely different, albeit equally demanding, terrain, the legendary Nürburgring Nordschleif. What has drawn the most attention is not only the location where this test took place, but how it was done. Under absolute secrecy, on May 9, 2025, Verstappen participated in an official test day organized by the Nürburgring Langstreckenserie using an unusual pseudonym for someone at his level, Franz Hermann. This detail was no coincidence. The goal was to go unnoticed, to avoid media coverage of the event, and above all, to avoid its direct association with his image as Red Bull's star driver and multiple world champion. Despite these intentions, certain elements betrayed his identity, such as his distinctive helmet and his usual racing suit, which did not go unnoticed by the most attentive attendees. This triggered a wave of rumors and theories that quickly began to circulate in specialized media, fan forums, and social media, generating a massive conversation surrounding his true intentions. The test was not improvised. Verstappen got behind the wheel of a Ferrari 296 GT3, a car radically different from his usual Formula One single-seater. This vehicle belonged to his personal team, Verstappen.com Racing, and was prepared by the Swiss team Emil Frey Racing, a strategic partner well-versed in the world of endurance and GT racing. The choice of model, team, and location were no small coincidence. The Ferrari 296 GT3 is a car specifically developed to dominate long-distance races, and the Nordschleif, nicknamed the Green Hell by drivers, is arguably the greatest technical, physical, and mental challenge a driver can face outside of F1. This combination reveals meticulous planning on the part of the Dutch driver, who, beyond the media spectacle he's accustomed to at the Grand Prix, is building an alternative path, carefully designed to expand his skills and possibly redefine his future in motorsport. The most intriguing thing is that this foray wasn't simply a personal curiosity or a whim during a half-year sabbatical. This test was part of a very specific process, obtaining the Nordschleif permit, an essential permit to officially compete in races like the 24 Hours of Nürburgring. This permit, regulated by the German Automobile Federation, is extremely demanding. Being an F1 world champion isn't enough to obtain it. It takes experience, discipline, and above all, a willingness to submit to the harsh conditions the circuit demands. For Verstappen, this means modifying his usual racing schedule, possibly adding extra commitments to an already packed F1 season, and taking risks that could eventually affect his performance or his professional image. The decision to take the step suggests a deep personal motivation, a kind of emotional debt to one of the world's most historic circuits, which he has considered one of his favorites for years, even since his participation in virtual races on the Nordschleif. And this is where the narrative tension that has captivated the motorsport community begins to build. What really motivates Verstappen to embark on such an ambitious project, yet so unrelated to his obligations in Formula One? Is he simply fulfilling a youthful dream, or is he charting an escape route, an alternative that allows him to leave behind the strict corporate environment of F1 without giving up top-level competition? These questions don't have simple answers, but they do reveal a new dimension in the Dutch driver's career, one that combines passion, strategy, and a sense of independence that very few can afford in the ultra-professionalized world of modern motorsport. Now that we understand how the secret test unfolded, under what conditions, and for what purpose, it's time to dive into what's really fueling the conversation in the paddocks, media, and social media, the rumors, leaks, and speculation about what's coming next. Because if this test on the Nordschleif was a message, it wasn't just any message. It was a warning that Max Verstappen is willing to break the mold and make decisions that could be game-changing. Since information leaked about Max Verstappen's secret test at the Nürburgring Nordschleif, the rumor mill has exploded in intensity and scope. What initially seemed like a simple private day of testing a GT3 car has unleashed a torrent of speculation, ranging from a possible participation in the Nürburgring 24 hours to a possible exit from Red Bull to Ferrari. Interestingly, these rumors didn't emerge out of nowhere. Many of the elements involved in this test have fueled the theory that there's a more complex narrative at play, one that could have medium and long-term consequences for both Verstappen and the Formula One ecosystem at large. The use of the Ferrari 296 GT3 is perhaps the most significant detail in that regard. Although this is a one-off collaboration and not a direct affiliation with Scuderia Ferrari F1, many analysts and fans did not miss the fact that Verstappen chose to work with a technical structure linked to the Italian manufacturer, rather than using a model from another brand or remaining linked to a partner related to Red Bull or Honda, its long-standing power unit supplier. These types of partnerships are not accidental in the world of motorsport. The presence of Emile Frey racing as a technical operator has also been interpreted as a nod to European structures that have greater autonomy from the Red Bull world, and that could serve as a bridge to other competitions such as the World Endurance Championship or even more ambitious factory programs. Several specialist journalists have reported that there is growing nervousness within the Formula One paddock regarding the true scope of this event. Some rival team executives have privately indicated that they see Verstappen's move as a first attempt at independence, a calculated step toward a future where his loyalty to Red Bull is no longer unquestionable. While Max has repeatedly reiterated his commitment to the Austrian team, his actions are beginning to tell a parallel story, one in which he doesn't want to be constrained by contractual obligations or the constant pressure of the F1 media circus. Added to this is a detail that has gone more unnoticed, but could be key: the choice of timing. The Nürburgring test took place on a date strategically located between two Grands Prix, at a time of relative media calm, indicating deliberate planning to avoid interference with his F1 obligations, but also to allow for a margin of reaction in case information leaked, as it ultimately did. This tactical choice has been interpreted by some as a sign that Verstappen and his entourage are playing the long game, managing his moves with a much more ambitious vision than simply participating in an endurance race. The coordination with his personal team, Emile Frey Racing, and the Nordschleif organizers not only demonstrates professionalism, but also a level of control over his schedule rarely seen in a driver so immersed in elite motorsport. At the level of public perception, the rumors have also had a dual effect. On the one hand, they have strengthened Verstappen's image as a tireless competitor, willing to step out of his comfort zone and take on challenges that other drivers would avoid for fear of failure or burnout. On the other hand, they have raised legitimate concerns about whether these types of side activities could affect his performance in Formula One. Fans are divided. While some celebrate this exploratory and challenging side of him, others believe it's an unnecessary distraction at a time when every point in the championship counts and Red Bull needs to maintain its dominance without internal unrest. But even this division is part of the Verstappen effect. Everything he does becomes a conversation starter, and every off-the-cuff move fuels a narrative of rebellion and indomitable talent that positions him as a driver unlike any other. With this in mind, and with the amount of speculation that continues to appear in the media and social networks every day, it's impossible not to wonder how the parties directly involved are responding. Because what is said externally is one thing, and what is brewing behind closed doors at Red Bull, within Verstappen's personal circle, and among the structures that could be betting on his leap to new categories, is quite another. The next section will allow us to delve into precisely that: how Red Bull is reacting, what Verstappen's real position is, and what signals both are sending in the face of a situation that has ceased to be anecdotal and has become a strategic issue. Red Bull's stance on Max Verstappen's secret test at the Nordschleif has remained ambiguous, at least publicly. So far, there has been no official statement from the team regarding the event or the rumors that have emerged in its wake, which is significant. In Formula One, silence is not usually a lack of opinion, but rather a strategy of communication control. This silence has led many to speculate that tense conversations and strategic evaluations are taking place internally regarding Verstappen's role within the team, his commitments outside of the premier class, and, most importantly, his level of long-term loyalty. Red Bull is not just a winning team. It is an organization that invests enormous resources in maintaining Verstappen as the gravitational center of its technical, media, and commercial project. Therefore, any sign of independence or deviation from the script by their star driver not only generates discomfort, but also raises profound questions about the sustainability of the bond that unites them. From within the paddock, several sources have begun to leak that some sectors of Red Bull are wary of Verstappen's decision to get involved with a Ferrari, even if it is in a completely different category than F1. For a brand that competes directly with the Scuderia and has built a narrative of historical rivalry with the Italian team, seeing its top exponent using the machinery of its most iconic competitor, even for technical or personal purposes, is no small matter. Modern motorsport is rife with contractual clauses, exclusivity agreements, and brand strategies that transcend the sporting aspect. And in that context, Verstappen, by acting on his own, has momentarily positioned himself outside the protective umbrella of Red Bull in an arena where image, loyalty, and commercial interests become as important as on-track performance. Even if there is no direct contractual breach, the fact that he made this decision without prior communication, without explicit coordination with his main team, has been interpreted by some as a covert challenge to the control that Red Bull has exercised for years over all aspects of his career. From Max Verstappen's perspective, his stance has been as firm as it is revealing. In unofficial statements circulated after the test, the Dutch driver assured that his commitment to Formula One is not affected by this type of activity and that he is simply exploring new experiences within motorsport. This statement, however, reveals a broader vision of his professional career. Verstappen no longer behaves like the young prodigy who needs constant validation from his surroundings. He now operates as an established figure with the authority to decide which projects he gets involved in, how he manages his image, and what kind of challenges he wants to take on outside the official F1 calendar. This is not only a natural evolution, but also a silent declaration of autonomy. What Max is saying, without saying it directly, is that he no longer needs to ask permission to grow as an athlete, and that his interests can go beyond the limits of a single series or a single team. His closest circle has supported this view. Raymond Vermeulen, his manager, has commented that Max is a complete competitor and that these types of tests are part of his development as a driver. Although the phrase may seem generic, the underlying message is clear. Verstappen is building an identity that goes beyond the Red Bull single-seater, beyond the Formula One championship. He is shaping the profile of a well-rounded driver, one who isn't content with dominating in a single environment, but instead seeks to make his mark in multiple disciplines of motorsport. Ultimately, this connects with a historical tradition that has shaped the legend of figures like Fernando Alonso, who has never been afraid to compete in other categories, or even Ayrton Senna, who dreamed of racing at Le Mans. Max appears to be entering that conversation, and that inevitably reshapes his place within the Red Bull ecosystem. What remains unclear is how Verstappen's personal expansion will impact Red Bull on a contractual and sporting level. While it's true that the team has built much of its current hegemony around him, it's also true that this relationship has been sustained by a delicate balance between performance, results, and control. If Verstappen begins to make more decisions outside of that framework, if his commitments outside of F1 begin to have a real impact on his schedule or energy, Red Bull could be forced to renegotiate terms, redefine expectations, or even consider scenarios in which Verstappen is no longer willing to continue within his current limits. This isn't an immediate rupture, nor an imminent crisis, but it is a warning sign that, in a category as competitive and media-driven as Formula One, could mark the beginning of a turning point. With all this in mind, the next step we must analyze is the potential consequences if Verstappen decides at some point to go beyond testing and actively participate in competitions outside of the F1 environment. Because a single technical test is one thing, but committing to endurance racing, parallel calendars, and projects that require time, focus, and preparation is quite another. And if that scenario were to materialize, the repercussions for Red Bull, for Formula One, and for Verstappen himself could be far deeper than many dare to publicly admit. That is precisely the dimension we will address next. The possibility that Max Verstappen is considering diversifying his career into other motorsports categories, although not yet confirmed, has far-reaching implications for both his personal trajectory and the ecosystem surrounding him. Formula One is a series that demands total dedication, not only physically and technically, but also mentally and emotionally. In an environment where the margins for error are minimal and where every millisecond can determine a championship, any distraction or parallel commitment can become a tangible risk. If Verstappen decides to formalize his foray into endurance racing or series like the Nürburgring Nordschleif, he would have to adapt his already busy schedule, reorganize his priorities, and, above all, manage a significant workload. It's not just about showing up at a track and driving. It involves specific training, mental preparation, simulator sessions, technical analysis with engineers, and physical testing adapted to the completely different nature of these competitions. One of the most immediate impacts that such a change in approach could have is the physical and mental strain on the driver himself. Endurance races, especially those held on circuits like the Nordschleif, are not only long in duration but brutally demanding in terms of sustained concentration and fatigue management. Completing laps lasting more than 8 minutes in an environment with blind corners, constant gradients, and ever-changing weather conditions is not something to be taken lightly. For a driver already under the extreme stress of a Formula One calendar consisting of 24 competitive weekends per year, adding commitments in other disciplines could lead to accumulated fatigue that affects not only his performance, but also his health and longevity as an elite competitor. This could translate into micro-errors during F1 races, a reduced ability to technically adapt to each circuit, or the need to cut back on preparation sessions with his engineering team, which at this level of competition can mean the difference between a victory and a retirement. In addition to the physical strain, there is a strategic component that should not be underestimated: the balance of power within F1. Verstappen is not just a dominant driver, he is a factor that currently defines the competitive balance of the championship. If for any reason his focus were to partially shift to other categories, this would open a window of opportunity for his direct rivals. Teams like Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren, or Aston Martin could capitalize on any drop in performance or lack of continuity from Red Bull, which relies heavily on Max's talent and consistency to stay at the top. In practice, a distracted or torn Verstappen could weaken the Austrian team's dominance, generate internal tensions, and eventually force Red Bull to rethink its sporting, technical, and commercial strategy. This would not only affect its on-track performance, but also its brand value, its sponsorship contracts, and the public image of a team that has grown accustomed to hegemony since Max assumed absolute leadership in the garage. On the other hand, there is the issue of public perception and media narrative. The media, fans, and motorsport analysts are constantly constructing stories around every decision made by the sport's biggest names. In that sense, a change of approach like the one hinted at by Verstappen's test at the Nordschleif could be interpreted in multiple ways. Some will see it as a natural evolution of a driver seeking to excel, refusing to be pigeonholed, and wanting to leave a legacy beyond Formula One. Others, however, will see it as a sign of escape, as an indication that Max might be feeling uncomfortable within the Red Bull ecosystem, or even that he is already planning his exit from F1 in the medium term. Both narratives directly impact his public image, his relationship with fans, and his ability to influence the sport. How he handles this phase will be crucial in shaping how he will be remembered in the future, as the champion who won it all without going out of his way, or as the driver who wanted to go further but jeopardized his throne in the process. No less relevant is the contractual risk. Red Bull maintains a meticulous structure when it comes to its drivers' commitments. Although there is no evidence that Verstappen broke any specific clause by participating in this test with a Ferrari GT3, it is possible that his contract includes restrictions or conditions regarding his activities outside of Formula One, especially those that involve physical risk or exposure to rival brands. If these conditions are interpreted as being breached, or if a precedent is set that makes sponsors or the team uncomfortable, this could lead to tense negotiations, forced renegotiations, or even an early termination. For now, everything indicates that Red Bull has opted for silence to contain any repercussions, but if Verstappen persists with this type of activity, they could change their stance and move to a more confrontational or restrictive phase. As can be seen, the decision to explore other horizons outside of Formula One is neither a minor nor a superficial issue. It has ramifications that affect the physical, strategic, contractual, media, and symbolic, Every step Max takes outside the traditional paddock has the potential to alter not only his immediate future, but the balance of the entire sport. And while there is still no final decision on his participation in official races outside of F1, the fact that he is testing, that he is doing so in secret, and that he is using vehicles from rival manufacturers indicates that something is moving in his environment with an intention that goes far beyond a simple recreational experience. Now that we understand the consequences that a change of focus in Verstappen's career could generate, it's time to look ahead and ask ourselves what could happen in the short and medium term. Because what has happened so far is one thing, and what could happen in the coming months is quite another when concrete decisions begin to be made, schedules are defined, and strategic moves begin to unfold in public view. This projection of the future will be the key to understanding whether we are witnessing a calculated transition or the beginning of a true shift in his legacy. The coming weeks and months will be crucial in clarifying the true direction Max Verstappen will take, both inside and outside of Formula One. Now that his presence at the Nürburgring is no longer a secret and has been widely debated by experts and fans alike, a new era begins in which Verstappen's actions will be closely scrutinized, not only by the media and fans, but also by key players in the paddock, the brands involved, and the F1 organization itself. The first sign to watch will be whether Max decides to continue with the requirements to obtain the Level A Nordschleifen permit, which is the essential license to officially compete in the Nürburgring 24 hours or other high-level endurance races. To achieve this, he would need to complete at least 2 Level B races under strict regulatory conditions, in addition to logging a minimum of 18 laps in real-life racing situations, which immediately implies an additional commitment to his already busy schedule. This process requires not only physical availability, but also strategic will on the part of Verstappen and his management team. In fact, if he chooses to pursue this path, it would be tacit confirmation that his interest in endurance racing is not a one-off, but rather part of a medium-term plan. There are already rumors, not yet confirmed by official sources, suggesting that Verstappen could be negotiating to participate in 1 or 2 select dates of the Nürburgring Langstrecken series, taking advantage of natural breaks in the F1 calendar. While this may seem feasible logistically, the truth is that any modification to his schedule directly impacts the training, physical preparation, and simulation programs that Red Bull meticulously plans for each Grand Prix. Therefore, every non-F1 race that Max considers will have to go through a priority filter that, at this point in his career, is no longer defined solely in terms of performance, but also in terms of legacy and future professional vision. One of the big unknowns looming over his immediate future is how the teams involved will react if Verstappen decides to move forward with this plan. Red Bull, although silent so far, will not be able to remain on the sidelines if its main driver begins to compete regularly in other types of events. This could force a contractual redefinition, or, at best, an update to the current conditions to establish clear parameters on what is allowed and what is not. On the other hand, if his participation in a high-profile endurance race is confirmed, we could see a new narrative emerge, that of Max Verstappen as a multi-class ambassador for motorsport, a figure capable of crossing categories with success and credibility, something very few have managed to maintain without sacrificing performance. This evolution of his public profile could even reposition his commercial value, opening up new opportunities with brands related to the GT and endurance worlds, while consolidating his status as a truly complete driver, not only for his titles, but also for his versatility in different competitive environments. From a technical perspective, there is also much to observe. If he decides to continue down this path, private testing and simulations focused on adapting the Ferrari 296 GT3 to Max's driving style will likely intensify. Remember that this car, although advanced, handles radically differently than a Formula One single-seater. Weight, load distribution, brake management, and aerodynamics are entirely new challenges requiring patience and progressive mastery. Upcoming tests could include new car configurations, perhaps even with custom settings designed exclusively to maximize the synergy between driver and car in environments as demanding as the Nordschleife. All of this, without losing sight of the fact that Verstappen remains the centerpiece of an F1 team looking to retain its dominance in the championship, which introduces constant pressure to maintain his performance at the highest level in both disciplines if he chooses to juggle both schedules. At the media level, A considerable increase in attention is also expected on his decisions. Cameras will follow his every move, and every public statement will be analyzed for clues about his true intentions. Is Verstappen plotting a gradual retirement from F1? Or is he simply marking his territory in other areas of motorsport as part of a broader visibility and positioning strategy? No one knows for sure, but the perception has already changed. The dominant narrative about him is no longer limited to his role as defending champion in the top flight, but now extends to a much more complex dimension, that of a driver who is exploring the limits of what is possible and who is not afraid to take risks to stay motivated, challenged, and relevant in an increasingly rapidly changing sport. With this vision of the immediate future, it is clear that we are entering a decisive stage in understanding the true purpose behind Max Verstappen's recent moves. What happens in the coming months will not only determine his racing calendar, but could also rewrite the power structure in Formula One and open a new era for drivers who aspire to transcend the traditional boundaries of the category. And right now, with this panorama in mind, it's time to pause and reflect. How might all this affect the internal dynamic between Verstappen and Red Bull in the coming seasons? Because when a driver begins to evolve beyond the team, the bond ceases to be simply a sporting one and becomes a matter of power, vision, and ultimately, shared destiny or separate paths.